Hello everybody, my name is Jackie and welcome to Prairie Sports Talk, the podcast where we talk about sports that directly impact the Canadian Prairie. And today we have a pair of interesting topics. So we are going to open up talking about the interesting backup quarterback scenario in Saskatchewan in the CFL. And then we are going to talk about the WCBL season kicking off and the fact that I feel so privileged to volunteer for my local Swift Current 57s. It's going to be a good episode. Let's get into it. We are less than 2 weeks away from the CFL season kicking off. And while we may know the starting quarterbacks for most teams, the backup situation is what really has my attention personally, especially in Saskatchewan. So last season, the backup race seemed pretty cut and dry in Saskatchewan. Trevor Harris, number one, backup Mason Fine, then Dolegala, and it didn't really matter beyond there. But then Jake Dolegala ended up having a great season after the injury of Trevor Harris. But for whatever reasons, the Riders made a move that I still very much disagree with and re-signed Mason Fine instead of Jake Dolegala. So Jake Dolegala goes and he signs in BC, and now the backup race in Saskatchewan ends up being Mason Fine and Shea Patterson. Now, coming into the preseason, I thought Mason Fine had this pretty much in the bag. I knew Patterson had had a solid training camp. I thought to myself, oh well, when the boys get out there, Fine will just blow Patterson out the water. But I think it was actually the other way around, and I think Patterson deserves the backup job. He played better than Fine in my opinion. Fine had a lot more time in the pocket, and he had, in the last game against Edmonton, he had less throws for less yards than Patterson, with more time on the field, with players that are higher up in the depth chart than Patterson had. In the game against Edmonton, Mason Fine went 9 for 11 for 82% completion and 0 picks, 1 TD. I mean, that's a solid game. That's pretty good. I think he played roughly a half. So you gotta give it to him. Fine played well. He had a little bit of a rough week before in week 1 against Winnipeg. But I mean, apparently he was sick or injured or something. I don't know. It's been hard to figure out if he was just sick or if he was hurt. But regardless, that kind of excuses that. But Patterson, who had a very solid game in week 1 against Winnipeg, ended up having not a bad game either against Edmonton. He went 5 for 8 with 63% completions, didn't throw a touchdown, but he had a pass that went for 34 yards. Patterson, he played solid enough to, in my opinion, lock up the backup job. Because Fine, of what I've heard, had an okay training camp. I guess you could say it was fine. But anyway, and then he played against Winnipeg. Granted, apparently he was sick or hurt, as I mentioned. But Patterson had a very good training camp, a pretty good game against Winnipeg, and a solid game against Edmonton. That's 3 solid data points for Patterson over Fine. I think you gotta take Patterson here. Fine, I think he's made a case to stay on the team, but I currently have him as a hesitant number 3 slot in the quarterback depth chart, with Jack Cohn being a practice roster player and Pipkin being kept on the team solely for short yardage. Now, granted, you can only have 3 quarterbacks dressed, so you'd have to decide between Fine and Pipkin. But I feel like if you have Patterson on the depth chart as the number 2, you don't really need Fine unless something goes horribly wrong and the starter and the backup both get hurt in the same game. Which, I'm from Saskatchewan. Starting quarterbacks getting injured, cutting down a promising season is something I am all too familiar with. So I like having a solid backup on the roster, to say the very least. I think Patterson is solid enough to be the backup. Fine is solid enough to be the third string. Coleman has a bright future, so I'd want to keep him on a practice roster. And Pipkin is a very solid short yardage QB, which is why I'd have him dressed for most games as opposed to fine. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below if you're on YouTube. I'm very curious to see what other people think, because I'm very aware of the fact that I am in the minority thinking that Patterson had a better training camp and preseason than Mason Fine. But like I said, let me know what you guys think. I'd love to hear some counter arguments. The WCBL is officially underway this season, and I'm very excited for this season. This is the first year I have volunteered for the local Swiftcurrent 57s, and I'm very excited for this season, even if it got off to a bit of a anticlimactic start. 57s began their season in Rayburn, beating the Beavers without much issue. The next night, on the 26th, they come home, and about 3 2/3 of the way into the top of the fourth, it starts raining even heavier than it was before. And that says something, because it was coming down pretty heavy through the first 3 innings. And it got to the point where you could tell the 57's pitcher was struggling to have any grip on the ball, and the Beavers started running up the score. It was 3-2 headed into the fourth in favor of the 57's. Before the bottom of the fourth, it was 6-3 Rayburn. And yeah, you could tell the defense was really starting to struggle. They looked sharp through the first few innings, but when the rain really got going, you could tell it had quite the impact. And the 57's gave up 4 runs in the third, and before we could even make it out of the top of the fourth, sorry, they gave up 3 runs in the fourth, but before we could make it out of that top of the fourth, the back catcher had to stand up and chase a ball that got past him. And as he put his plant foot in the ground and turned, fell flat. He slipped because it was so muddy and just so slick. And the umpires ended up having to call rain delay and eventually postpone the game. But no worries, on May 29th, the day before this video goes up, and the day where I record this video, the Swiftcurrent 57s are taking on the Fort McMurray Giants. And if you're watching this on release day, guess what? The 57s have a game tonight as well against the Giants as well. I'm very excited for this season. I'm very excited to volunteer for the 57s. If you see me at one of the games, don't hesitate to flag me down and chat. I love talking sports. But this is a season I'm very excited for. But that is everything I have for you guys this week. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you're on YouTube. And if you're on Spotify, be sure to follow the 13th Man Podcast Network. And if you feel like you haven't seen enough Prairie Sports Talk today, don't worry, I uploaded an extra video yesterday talking about the NHL playoffs. If you want to see that, there will be a card on the video and a link in the description down below if there has been another video uploaded since then. I hope you guys have a great day, a great week, a great whatever. Stay safe, stay strong, you got this. And this is Jackie for Prairie Sports Talk, signing off.